Recently, Apple announced that they will switch to their own CPU designs for Macs, desktops, laptops, workstations. It will be based on ARM64 instruction set, but CPU design will be unique and new. Apple already had one switch like this back in 2005 from IBM's PowerPC, which was also RISC-based. RISC is an instruction set with reduced instructions in it. Apple has already been successful with their custom CPU designs in iPhone, iPad, and other things. And the interesting thing is that in many areas, their lower powered products outperform Intel's solutions. For example, 4K video editing on iPad Pro is possible, while some Intel-based MacBooks are struggling. If you look around on internet, you will see how many people are even comparing iPad Pro to Threadripper-based workstations. An iPad actually has faster render times. But of course, it is related to the software itself. In these examples, Adobe Premiere on Threadripper side and Lumia Fusion on iPad Pro side, extremely optimized. So the main question is, how will productivity suffer or maybe gain something from these new Apple custom architecture and design CPUs? Especially music production is tricky because it really relies on many plugins and third-party software components. And a lot of this software is not maintained. I still have some VST plugins that were never upgraded to 64 bits. They work in wrappers with small performance penalty, but they still work. The last time Apple computers had transition like this was with some hiccups. PowerPC used simpler instruction set, and it is harder to imagine which more complex instructions to use instead of them. So the performance loss was felt by the user there. But there could be some gains from going from more complex instruction set to simpler as well. The problem is that compilers, the program that actually translates the written code into instructions that the CPU can do, has harder time to figure out when to use a given more complex instruction rather than a simpler instruction. And in solutions based on ARM RISC chips, more complex tasks have a separate accelerator for these tasks. Of course, you cannot make accelerator for every possible task, but these companies bet that you will probably need a very specific few things to work really well. For example, encryption, encoding, decoding, different DSP tasks, that's digital signal processing, AI accelerators and other accelerators. So far we have heard mixed reports. Some people say that x86 software recompiled for Apple ARM64 will actually run faster. Others say that Apple will, let's say, assign important tasks to weaker cores or something like that and lose performance there. Some applications probably will simply not work at all. Of course, there will definitely be some virtualization software and hardware-based software that will definitely not work when the architecture will be changed. But I feel that for graphically intense creativity tasks, there can be great gains with Apple Silicon. But of course with some incompatibilities here and there. And for music production, if there will be a well-developed wrapper, the performance loss will be small for most cases. I hope most of the development companies will recompile their plugins. For some plugins that are no longer developed or simply don't work in wrappers, I guess the only thing you can do then is just to run them on the Intel-based system and render the tracks out or replace this plugin with some other plugin, because that's just how Apple works. If it's not compatible, sorry. Future is moving on. If you're not, well, what to do? And also, Apple will use Rosetta 2 software that will translate x86 64 instructions to ARM 64 instructions just once. So, no real time translation is necessary, which is better. In general, it is interesting that the world is now moving more towards reduced instruction sets instead of more complex ones. Maybe it is because x86 is controlled by a few companies and Intel process node is suffering currently. Or maybe we need to wait till AI models will help to better compile applications so they would use these complex instructions really efficiently. When RISC was introduced, it was called regress and sometimes de-innovation by some supposed industry specialists. But because it used a very small amount of energy, it survived and actually now it thrives. So let's see how good these ARM-based custom Apple CPUs will do in productivity, and that's it. Thank you for listening.